New Orleans Saints running back Alvin Kamara raves about head coach Kellen Moore. Let's break down why. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media, covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, the Saints should absolutely be interested in Noah Fant, and we'll take a look at the rest of the tight end position. We'll also take a look at the defensive line rotation, what we've seen so far, and why it feels like the Saints' new defensive scheme is clicking quite quickly, say that 3 times fast, as training camp is underway. And we'll kick everything off with Alvin Kamara kind of raving a little bit in his own way about head coach Kellen Moore and what stands out to him. We got all that coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Today, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com. and get 50% off your first year. Yeah, it was a big day for the New Orleans Saints getting their training camp day started. If you want your training camp observations, make sure you go to yesterday's episode for that. Our live episode will be live covering today's training camp practice at 9 p.m. Central Time with the Saints Squad Show, myself, John Hendricks, Dylan Sanders, and Lance Moore. But today, what I want to focus on is Alvin Kamara, who absolutely raved about Kellen Moore in his own way, in particular highlighting 2 specific factors. Number 1, balance, and number 2, intention. And this is something that I think is really, really important for any head coach, is being intentional. No decision is made without there being an illustrative reason or a demonstrative reason for that decision being made. And Alvin Kamara went down the idea of kind of like highlighting the practice, the practice schedule and when things are happening and why they're happening, when players are on the field, why they're on the field, all that. And if you're talking about that as a player from the practice schedule standpoint, you absolutely have to be excited about that type of intentionality being put into your offense as well, particularly as a star, versatile offensive playmaker like Alvin Kamara. So for me, this was a big highlight of the day, or one of the big highlights of the day, in terms of media availability for New Orleans. And the other thing that I think was really important was the discussion of balance. So I asked Alvin if, looking back at Kellen Moore's history of success with different run games, run schemes, and running backs, if that makes him excited going into this 2025 season with Kellen Moore at the helm. And he shared that, of course, it's very exciting. And he specifically highlighted Saquon Barkley and the success that Saquon had with Kellen Moore last year and that Kellen Moore had with Saquon last year. And it was Nick Underhill who followed up and asked a little bit about, like, are you ready for Saquon Barkley? Like, would you want Saquon Barkley level touches? So just to put that in perspective, Alvin Kamara's career high in touches, which means combined carries and catches, right? So it's all that put together into one metric, one stat, if you will, was 296, right? So he's never eclipsed 300 touches in a season. And by the way, that 296, to Alvin Kamara's credit, came last year, where he appeared in just 14 of 17 possible games, missing the last 3 games due to that groin injury that he had, catching the Cedric Wilson touchdown. But Saquon Barkley, on the other hand, last year, and that's just regular season touches. Saquon Barkley last year had 378 regular season touches and 104 in the postseason. So just an insane season for Saquon Barkley. And one of the things that Alvin Kamara highlighted was the idea of balance. It's not necessarily about volume for him, but it's about balance. He said it doesn't matter if I get 5 catches versus 10 carries or 10 catches versus 5 carries, as long as those carries, those touches come when I can be most impactful, that's when I'm most excited. And so he kind of outlined this idea of balance. And it's really interesting because one of the things that we discussed going back to like 2021, 2022 was the sort of overusage of Alvin Kamara between the tackles, that the efficiency wasn't there because the balance and the intentionality also wasn't there. So if the thing that Alvin Kamara is looking for is intentionality in the way that he's utilized, if the thing that Alvin Kamara is looking for is balance in the way that he's utilized, and now you're hearing all of this praise about Kellen Moore's intentionality and his focus on balance, and we can see the focus on balance over the course of Kellen Moore's career, then I think that that's a pretty good indication of what could work between Alvin Kamara and Kellen Moore. So I thought it was super, super interesting to hear what it was that stood out to Alvin Kamara about Kellen Moore and how that immediately aligned with the things that Alvin Kamara effectively wants in this offense more than anything else. Alvin Kamara does not want to be overused. Alvin Kamara does not want to be underused. Alvin Kamara wants to see a balance in the way that he is used and maximizing his touches. And of course, I'm sure a balance with the rest of the backfield as contributors of a unit as a whole, as opposed to him being such a maybe like a bell cow type of back, right? And that's what we've seen in some of the recent years. I actually thought that Clint Kubiak's usage of Alvin Kamara was pretty solid last year. Got him involved in the run game, got him involved in space, got him involved in the outside run game, but didn't necessarily have a balance of also getting him involved on the inside, also getting him involved in different areas of the passing game, the angle routes, the Texas routes, the option routes over the middle of the field. There was a lot of swing passes to the outside or different things happening outside the numbers or outside the hash marks going towards the boundaries. That was kind of his utilization in the passing game. And so with all of that, the balance of that feels like something that effectively is right in Kellen Moore's wheelhouse. Now, the other thing that I thought was interesting, and it was really funny, it was a joke, but I loved it because look, Alvin Kamara is always the guy that's going to tell you the truth, whether the team likes it or not, whether anybody likes it or not. Alvin Kamara is going to tell you the truth. Remember, he's the guy that said that the team didn't have identity years ago, and something that the head coach at the time, Dennis Allen, balked at the idea. Of course, we have an identity, and it remains to be seen what that identity was. But Alvin Kamara was pretty clear that he didn't feel like they had it. And so you've always known that he'll be very truthful. And one of the things that he said was that he likes Kellen Moore. He spent a lot of time observing him, kind of watching him, all these other things. And he said he really likes him. But if he ever does anything kind of out of line, or if he ever does anything that makes him upset, he'll be sure to let us know. So I thought that was pretty funny too. But it was just interesting to already see sort of the relationship between those two begin to build. Obviously a mutual respect there between both of them. But I loved the idea of balance and intentionality, because when it comes to where Alvin Kamara has absolutely been at his best, it has been when his usage is balanced, being utilized in the run game and in the passing game, but also intentional, that sometimes the mismatch is there for him in the passing game, other times the mismatch is there for him in the run game. And so being intentional about how to utilize that takes him to that next level. We'll see if Kellen Moore can maximize that. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at the defensive side of the football, the defensive line rotation. Very interesting. And of course, we're already seeing this New Orleans Saints new defensive scheme click quite early. We'll dive into all that as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. That means it's time to fire up the group chat, get your draft boards ready, and of course, bring on all the overreactions that we live for. It's all going down over on Yahoo Fantasy, the only app that I use. I'm always playing over at Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first timer or you're setting up your millionth league. From that great interface to the great message boards where the smack talk just hits different, it's all there for you, and it gets even better. Because to celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. And it all begins August 4th. So stay tuned and get started by creating your own league or joining a Yahoo Fantasy League at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. At yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. All right, family, the New Orleans Saints defensive line rotation has already brought a little bit of intrigue because It could lead to a revitalization for at least 3 different players that are looking for their next step for New Orleans. And one player in particular, it's been around for a while, is very, very excited about what the New Orleans Saints are doing on that side of the football, and particularly in the trenches. Let's get this started here as we continue on. I do want to remind you we have our squad show later on today, 9 p.m. Central Time. Myself, John Hendricks, Dylan Sanders, Lance Moore, all going live to break down everything. I will not have a solo live episode because I want you to come in for the squad show and get everybody's kind of viewpoints, not just mine. So we'll dive into all that for an hour long later on this evening. Now, as we take a look at where things lie for the New Orleans Saints training camp, it's been really fun watching the defensive line already. I mean, look, we're just one day in, but you know me, I get really excited about football. I love some football. And so the things that I've seen so far on the defensive line have been pretty exciting. I mean, look, we saw a lot of pressure from this New Orleans Saints defensive line during day one of training camp. It's just day one, but Jasheem Davis, the undrafted free agent out of Wake Forest, had a great pressure. Nathan Shepard had what I notched down as a sack. Cam Jordan had some pressure. Chase Young I notched down as a sack as well. You look at guys like Jonah Williams getting into the backfield too. So there's a little bit of goodness coming from this New Orleans Saints defensive line. And there's a lot of reasons why, right? Brandon Staley's new defensive scheme has the stand-up edge rushers over on the side. That gives you guys like Carl Granderson, Chase Young, Isaiah Foskey, Fadil Diggs, Jasheem Davis, and of course Cameron Jordan. This kind of new designation as edge rushers as opposed to defensive ends or edge defenders. So they're not necessarily guys that are just looking to eat up a blocker to free up a gap for a linebacker to shoot in the run game. These guys are going after whoever has the football, whether it's the quarterback, the running back, a jet sweep on a wide receiver, whatever it might be. Whoever's got the football, these edge rushers are coming after them. And of course, with a concerted effort in getting after the quarterback. Then you add to that 3 effectively interior defensive linemen. Now, I use heavy air quotes when I say interior defensive linemen, because when you take those edge rushers and you take them off of the defensive line with their hands in the dirt and you have them stand up over on the outside and you put 3 guys on the inside, those 3 guys on the inside effectively become the interior defensive line. But at the same time, those guys are playing on the edge too, right? Like some of them are lining up over tackles, so on and so forth, with their hands in the dirt. Now that tackle is going to try to get the width to get outside and be able to get after those defensive ends that are on the outside, the edge rushers on the outside. But then that opens up a lane to the inside shoulder of those tackles and opens up a lane to the outside shoulder of the guards for the interior guys. And so if you think about it, you got 2 stand-up edge rushers, you got 2 defensive ends with their hands in the dirt, and you got a nose tackle right in the middle of the defense. And all of a sudden, you got a 5-on-5 situation when you decide to send all 5 of those defensive players, giving this defense more one-on-one opportunities. Now, the team has to win those one-on-ones, but that's part of what I referenced before about kind of the revitalization or the next step for guys like Chase Young, Carl Granderson, and Isaiah Foskey is going to be, can they win those one-on-ones? Because if they can win those one-on-ones, get after the quarterback, and then make the play at the quarterback, which has to be the most important thing. And that's the part that we don't know until the season begins, roughly the preseason as well. Maybe we see a little bit of it during the preseason. But those guys finishing plays at the quarterback and not having all of the almost sacks boxes checked, then I think that's going to be what really takes them into sort of ascension when it comes to that next level step for the defense. I think, personally, that you're going to need another year before this pass rush is really super successful, right? Has the chance to be really super successful. I don't think that the Saints had the opportunity to do a ton on the defensive line. They did do a lot of work, though. I mean, they drafted Fadil Diggs. They brought in Jasheem Davis. But again, that's a 7th-round draft pick and an undrafted free agent. They re-signed Chase Young, which was the biggest move at the edge rusher spot. And then they did a lot more work on the defensive interior, which makes sense because that's kind of where we had the biggest question marks around who's going to fit and who's not going to fit, going from Dennis Allen's more even front system, though a multi-front system, into Brandon Staley's more 3-4 odd front system. And so with that taken into consideration, the additions of guys like Devon Godshaw, Jonathan Bullard, who was not at practice on on Wednesday, because he was not officially signed yet, but that signing is now official, along with safety Julian Blackmon. So I assume we'll see both those guys at practice today. And then the draft pick of Vernon Broughton, who ends up helping out there too. I think you're going to see a little bit of these guys be able to be kind of maximized in a certain way. One thing that stood out to me that Cam Jordan mentioned in terms of maximizing a player's ability was when he kind of acknowledged that Bryan Bresee was going to have like a defensive end label. And if there's anything worth paying a lot of attention to on the Saints defensive line when it comes to the interior, that right there is a huge one. Bryan Bresee, who is a noted pass rusher, noted to also be way, way more athletic than people think that he is. He has that incredible spin move in his pass rush arsenal when it comes to his pass rush moves. He's got really good athleticism. He surprises. He kind of jumps off the screen or jumps off the field in that way. Putting him in those situations where all of a sudden he's on the edge, but the edge is being defended by a guard because the tackles are having to get so much more width to match up with the outside edge rushers, that could be really intriguing. And that could be really successful for Bryan Bresee, who led the team in sacks last year with 7.5. So between Chase Young getting back to a more athletic pass rush first play style and set of responsibilities, Cam Jordan doing the same, Carl Granderson doing the same, and Isaiah Foskey doing the same. Remember, Isaiah Foskey holds the Notre Dame sack record for 187 years of history over the course of that time. And he holds the all-time sack record there. Played more of a stand-up edge rusher role. Now he gets a chance to do it. And we saw it. We saw it in the first day of training camp, right? This isn't trying to guess anymore. This isn't us looking and saying, well, this is what could be good for Isaiah Foskey. Like, we're seeing it. He's standing up and he's rushing the passer. He's not having to learn how to be a run defender. He's not being relegated to a special teams role only. He's standing up and rushing the passer. Now, can he make the best of that? We'll find out. We won't really know until preseason or regular season games like we mentioned. But you add all of that because of the threat of these edge rushers and having to get outside these tackles. Then all of a sudden you have space between the tackle and the guard, and Bryan Bresee is rushing on the other side. It could be a pretty good situation for Bryan Bresee and this defensive pass rush. So I think what we're seeing so far hasn't surprised us. We're seeing guys like Colin Saunders and Christian Boyd and John Ridgway, and as well as Devon Gottschall play 3-4 nose tackle, but then a couple of those guys like Devon Gottschall also playing 3-4 defensive end, while Bryan Bresee plays 3-4 defensive end, and Jonah Williams plays 3-4 defensive end. So the versatility there, and even Nathan Shepard playing 3-4 defensive end and getting a sack during Wednesday's practice. Like, we're already seeing that, yeah, this 3-4 defense does work for these defensive linemen, and in some cases maybe even can get better play out of them, or at least create better opportunities for them than what the previous system did. So far, so good there. That's what the rotation's looking like, but lots on the way for that New Orleans Saints edge rusher group and pass rush as a whole. Coming up next, let's take a look at the New Orleans Saints tight end room, which had what feels like a mass exodus, but isn't actually a mass exodus, but some more opportunities opening up. And I'm going to tell you why the Saints should, like the Cincinnati Bengals, be reaching out to Noah Fant. Let's get to that as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints for the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by friends over at Monarch Money. Do you ever wish that managing your money was easier? Gosh, haven't we all been there? Especially if you're like me and you have personal expenses that are different than business expenses, and you have business income that gets rerouted to those business expenses, and then you got taxes to do with it. You're not just for yourself, but for your LLC. Like, there's so much of this other stuff that's going on. Monarch Money has been a lifesaver when it comes to all that, because it's taken me from having all of these kind of 5 or 6 different apps and helped me cull it down to like Monarch Money and my banking app, which is amazingly free feeling. Even gives you some great collaborative tools too if you're sharing finances with somebody, business or personal wise. Highly, highly recommend checking out Monarch Money, because it'll help you take control of your finances today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com. You'll get 50% off of your first year. You did not hear that wrong. That's monarchmoney.com. Promo code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints should absolutely be interested in going after former now Seattle Seahawks tight end Noah Fant. Man, this is an easy one for me. The Saints need help at tight end. They've got Juwan Johnson, they've got Jack Stoll, but then after that, you got a lot of unanswered questions so far. Can Michael Jacobson go from being a standout training camp guy to being a contributor during the regular season? What does Trayton Welsh bring to the team with advanced and expanded opportunities, which we'll begin to see? Maliki Mataval as well, coming in as the 7th round draft, or one of the 7th round draft picks for New Orleans. What opportunities can he see? And same thing for Seth Green, coming in from the UFL, who has this sort of really eclectic and interesting and honestly intriguing background as a former quarterback, former Wildcat, wide receiver rather, and then moving into the tight end position. But I do think that when you have an opportunity to grab a guy that over the course of the past few years appeared in 48 of 51 possible games, so some durability, 130 receptions for 1,400 receiving yards and 5 touchdown catches. He had 10 touchdown catches as well during his time with the Broncos during his first 3 seasons. So he gives you a really solid pass catching opportunity. He's a really good physical tight end as well, who brings a little bit of blocking prowess, comes from that Iowa, incredible sort of pipeline of tight ends to the NFL and everything. And I think that when you have the opportunity to get a guy that can block, that can be physical, and that is an absolute mismatch nightmare at the next level, I think you should probably consider that. Now, Noah Fant is first going on his visit with the Cincinnati Bengals, but I think that this is something that the Saints should be all over. That feels like a really, really good fit for Kellen Moore in this offense, signing him to a contract and giving him an opportunity to go out there and be able to compete. Now, here's the tricky part, right? What do you do with him when you've got him, Juwan Johnson, and Foster Moreau, and Jack Stoll, right? There's a really good 4 tight end group there, but then once Taysom Hill's ready, how do you impact it? So for Noah Fant, he might see a more immediate opportunity elsewhere, right? The reason why he got cast out in Seattle isn't because he was ineffective, but because they have AJ Barner, and they just drafted Elijah Arroyo as well in this year's draft, or last year's draft, whenever it was, coming out of Miami. And so there's a lot of really, really strong, there's already a pair of really strong tight ends in addition to Noah Fant over in Seattle. And so does Noah Fant really want to go to the same or a similar situation here in New Orleans? And look, this was the question from Cliff Jordan from our live show. So I want to make sure I give him a shout out there, who wanted to know, should the Saints sign Noah Fant? I think they should be interested, you know what I mean? But it's not a one-way street, right? Noah Fant's got to want to sign there. And maybe the opportunity isn't necessarily here for him. I do think that there was another question from Donald Blunt that came up during the live stream as well that I thought was super interesting, having to do with the tight end position, where he asked who I think will be the number 1 target at tight end in 2025. And that's honestly easy for me. It's Juwan Johnson. And so when you already have somebody that's going to be your established tight end 1, it's going to be a little hard to try to, court somebody that has the ability to be an established tight end 1 in the right system to your team. And the reason why I think that Juwan Johnson is going to be that guy is because at the end of every season, when the Saints have sort of started to lean on him, he's been successful for them. And so I think that if Kellen Moore, who made it a point to bring him back, the Saints sign him to a nice contract as well to get him here and to keep him here in New Orleans, that they've got to make all that make sense. They've got to make all that worth it. I think Juwan's a really talented guy. He looked good during his first day of training camp as well. And so I think as long as the Saints are actually utilizing him in a way that's going to be beneficial to him, moving him out wide every now and then, using him in the slot, bringing him in line, but then also being able to just really get him focused as a pass catcher, I think there's value there when you have other guys that can also block, like a Foster Moreau or a Jack Stoll, who can come in and help you there, or a Maliki Mataval if he ends up making the roster, which there's absolutely now a path towards doing that if you're Mataval. So I think that for New Orleans, when it comes to their tight end room, yeah, I'd be interested in Noah Fant. But does Noah Fant make or break your tight end room? No. And are you investing in the tight end room probably next offseason one way or another? Yeah, probably. You know what I mean? So there's going to be a lot of change at a lot of these positions from what we see from 2025 through 2026. Is why I always stress that this is a multi-year process, for this team. And that's okay. That's a fine place to be if you're a Saints fan, and on top of all that, if you're the New Orleans Saints as a whole as well. I think that that's a fine position to try to find yourself here. So I think that that's kind of the way that I view this tight end room, but I'm so excited to see how the rest of this kind of training camp period pans out, because you have no Foster Moreau. You have no Taysom Hill. Both guys were spotted during practice and were present and around, but they're not participating. And so how do you, as some of these younger tight ends, see and seize that opportunity that now lies ahead of you? So that's what I'm going to be looking for when it comes to this tight end position. If you want more on quarterback passing numbers, other observations, make sure you go back to yesterday's live show. We'll be live again later on tonight. Myself, John, Lance, and Dylan, all for our squad show at 9 p.m. Central Time. Don't forget to go and support the rest of our Locked On Louisiana lineup, Locked On Pelicans with Jake Madison, and Locked On LSU with Matt Moscona as well. And just as a quick reminder, in case you didn't catch the episode where I kind of laid everything out about what we're doing here over the course of training camp, every day that the Saints have practice, you will get 2 episodes. On Monday and Thursday, that second episode is a squad show that I've been promoting today that you know about, 9 p.m. Central Time. On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, if the Saints have practice, my second episode will be later on in the afternoon after I'm done with observations and all that good stuff, probably as early as I can get it done, 4, 5-ish, somewhere around there. And so you'll always be able to catch that. And that includes, too, if the Saints have practice on a Saturday or a Sunday, you'll get 2 episodes during those days. If the Saints don't have practice on a weekday, you get your morning episode, as always, not going anywhere Monday through Friday. That will always be there. But if the Saints don't have practice on a Saturday or a Sunday, I might take that day off. So just keep in mind a lot of 2-a-days and a lot of extra episodes coming your way as we continue on here all throughout New Orleans Saints training camp. We appreciate you very much. As always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else or on your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Know what other families doing. Know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.